Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with Review Masterclass, how to become a record critic, a classical record critic, by looking at samples that you have submitted of your own work. And I thank you very, very much for doing this. As I've said many times, the point here is to be constructive. It's not to rip you to shreds, although if that happens, well, it's part of the game, isn't it? So what I have here, and I asked for 3 pithy paragraphs. One of the paragraphs isn't so pithy, but it's a review of the Paul McCreish Dream of Gerontius on Signum. So, this is a big project to review one of these things because large choral works are difficult because they're very complicated. So there's a lot to talk about. It's very difficult to summarize everything that you need to do in a small space. And in addition to that, this is a work that has a devoted following and an important discography that you simply have to know. And I will say, this person knows the discography quite well, maybe too well, as you will see. The issues in this review are ones largely of style, not of fact. You don't have to get into the opinions about the performance, but it's the way that things are described. So let's just get into it. Paragraph number 1. Signum Classics has released a new version of Edward Elgar's famous oratorio, The Dream of Gerontius, which offers few surprises but compares well against the old favorites. Okay, already, this is just too wordy. Obviously, they've released it. We're reading the review. We know that. So all you have to say is, this new recording of The Dream of Gerontius offers few surprises, but compares well with the old favorites. Period. We don't have to start with, it's not a Mitchell novel. It doesn't begin with, the creation of the universe and the Big Bang, and then the dinosaurs and, hominids, and then finally you get to, Times Square in 1963. You just get to it. So the period orchestra, known as the Gabrieli Consort and Players, and its founding conductor, Paul McCreish, have given a straightforward interpretation which is scrupulously loyal to Elgar's dynamic markings. All right. Again, way too many words. The period orchestra known as the Gabrieli Consort and Players? We don't have to say that. All you have to say is the period orchestra, McCreish and his period orchestra, have given a straightforward, not have given, don't use passive voice, give a straightforward interpretation, scrupulously loyal to Elgar's dynamic markings. Again, you've gotten rid of a lot of unnecessary verbiage and said exactly the same thing in a far more direct way. So, example, we now have, take the orchestral interlude in part 2 between the guardian angels, praise to the name, and Gerontius's anguished, take me away. Yeah, that thing. For instance, period. McCreish expertly builds the listener's sense of anticipation in his execution of the stringendo marking, which sees a steady build-up of tempo up to the tremendous triple forte climax, as underlined by Elgar in the score, representing the moment of divine judgment, period. Oh my, that is a stylistic mess, that sentence. It really is. All you have to say is, take the orchestra, take the masterful handling of tempo in the orchestral interlude, period. That's it. All the rest of that descriptive folderol is completely unnecessary. It really is. And there's just a lot of dangling participles, bad syntax and style in that sentence, anyway, with way too many commas and, subordinate clauses and whatnot. It all needs to be put back together. Conductors have not always been successful here. In the 2008 Elgar version, the climax is slightly underplayed and the moment too controlled. Well, I would get rid of that sentence completely. You can just say conductors have not always been successful here, period, if you want to say anything at all. You're not trying to make a comparison with every single example. You're trying to show why this one was a particularly good one. So that is the first pithy paragraph, which is now infinitely pithier. We have increased its pith, its pithitude. So now the second paragraph, which is big. This is a long one. This is a monster. It's a big, long paragraph that we need to really, really compress. But let's go to it. The singers who are the meat of any such piece. Yeah, we know that. You don't have to tell us. Do justice to the work. The singers do justice to the work, largely. You might want to qualify it somehow, but that's simple declarative statement. Nicky Spence, Gerontius, sings with a deep, rich tenor, communicating earnestness, but also the manful courage of a faithful believer ready to take a great leap into the unknown and entrust God with his soul. Okay, I would only say he sings with a deep, rich tenor. You know, you want to go into communicating a little bit more. I mean, you could just say offering a believable interpretation of a committed, believer, something like that. Again, it's so wordy, and you're giving your view of what his timbre sounds like, and a timbre does not sound like the manful courage of a faithful believer ready to take a great leap into the unknown and entrust God with his soul. I mean, that's an interpretation of what it sounds like to you. And you could do a little of that. I mean, you're not just reporting facts in a bland way, but it doesn't have to be a big, long thing there. Then the line, "I go before my judge," towards the end of part 2, is sung in a wrenching pianissimo. Well, pianissimi are usually not wrenching. I would just say hushed. Watch out for adjectivitis here, folks. Just too many adjectives. You're saturating, the reader with all of this extra description that doesn't really help. So, because as you have here, a wrenching pianissimo, where the adjective and the noun don't really modify each other happily, in line with Elgar's marking. Okay, it is sung in a hushed pianissimo, or an intense. You can say an intense pianissimo in line with Elgar's marking. That would work, right? But wrenching, I don't know what's wrenching. Wrenching, hammering, sawing. We don't want to get too many power tools and other, carpentry things messed up in here. Then we've got, let's see, a strategic use of breath, especially when singing "Take me away," conveys the necessary expressiveness. No, get rid of that. You've already talked about "Take me away." You mentioned it, and I don't think you need to, not necessarily the singing of it, but you mentioned that part, and it's 3 words. I don't think you need to get into it there at all. Other smaller voiced and more lyrical tenors capture Gerontius's vulnerability more consistently. Richard Lewis in the 1965 Barbarella Halle, for example, period. Andrew Foster Williams. Okay, so why would you do that? Why are you undermining what you've just said about him being a wonderful tenor by talking about how other tenors do other things better? You could say he's comparable. You could say all kinds of things. But to say one thing, to make a positive statement, then immediately take it back is bad critical style. You may want to talk about other Gerontius tenors, such as so-and-so and so-and-so, may realize these qualities more effectively. But that's later, and not in direct opposition to praising and then taking back. That's what I call gramophone style. Gramophone style is when you say, this is great, but this isn't great. This was good, but that's not good. This is fine, but that's not fine. And the review winds up saying absolutely nothing because you immediately contradict yourself with every positive phrase of a negative phrase. No need to do that. If it's good, tell people it's good. And that's enough. It really is. And you'll get rid of a lot of extra verbal stuff here. Andrew Foster Williams, as the priest, has a ringing, authoritative bass baritone, which combines the gravitas of a divine steward with the loving consolation the hero of the piece requires, much in the mold of John Shirley Quirk in the 1987 Rattle BSO recording. Okay, again, way too many words. Good grief. All you have to say is, Andrew Foster Williams, as the priest, sings with ringing authority, recalling perhaps the contribution of John Shirley Quirk in the 1987 Rattle recording. Period. That's it. Again, you don't have to say what it means. He's the ringing authoritative who gives the consolation that a person in Gerontius' condition really needs because he's feeling something. Don't go there. Just talk about the quality of the singing, what it means. In the wider sense, everybody will make up their own minds, but just talk about the quality of the music making. Then we've got, let's see, So Andrew Foster, there we go. This is particularly apparent in his rendition of Proficere Anima Christiana, which compares favorably to the maladroit bellowing with which Bryn Terfel begins this number in the Elgar Halle recording. What are you talking about? It compares favorably to the maladroit bellowing? That's just, it's nonsense. I'm sorry. That doesn't mean anything. If you want to say it's superior to, Terfel, fine. Maladroit bellowing is such a peculiar use of words, a peculiar phrase. It's people are going to look at that and say, what the heck? So no, that's got to go. And I would take that whole line out, because you've said he sings well. You said he has the right quality of voice. That's enough. That's enough. You don't have to stick an example after every single point that you make. A couple well-chosen examples are what you really need. Not just, oh, well, here's one, and then there's one, then there's one, then there's one. We know you listened to the recording. It's obvious that you have. Don't overdo it. So there, we got rid of that, right? So, as the angel of the agony, he gives an affecting performance with plenty of pathos when he sings, Jesus, spare these souls. Okay, that's all right. Again, just get rid of it. Meanwhile, Anna Stephanie shines as Gerontius' loving and loyal, but utterly honest guardian angel. Loving and loyal, but utterly honest. Adjectivitus. It's making me itch. Loving and loyal guardian angel is fine. It's all you need to know. Meanwhile, let's see. Yeah, loving, right. She takes seriously the animato indicated on the line, "O happy suffering soul, for it is safe, consumed, yet quickened by the glance of God." You don't have to quote the whole line. She just at the passage, "O happy suffering soul." Period. Move on. Her warm maternal mezzo-soprano makes purgatory sound like a day at the fun fair. Get rid of that sentence. That's not complimentary. It's not helpful. And you've already said that she's excellent and wonderful and honest and lovely and charming and comforting and all of those things. So you don't have to go there. That's out of place. Her notes lack the piercing resonance of Janet Baker in Barbarolli's ensemble, but the emotion in her voice is palpable, particularly in the closing lines. Okay, you want to make that comparison? It's logical, because Janet Baker is the iconic interpreter of that particular role. So what I would say is, her notes may lack the resonance, not to say piercing resonance. Not every noun needs an adjective. Resonance is fine. Lack the resonance of Janet Baker in Barbarolli's ensemble, or of Janet Baker. You don't even have to say in Barbarolli's ensemble, or Janet Baker for Barbarolli, comma. But the emotion in her voice is palpable, particularly in the closing lines. Okay, fine. Last paragraph, and this one is pithy. The choir is a mixed bag. It is I don't think you mean that quite the way you think you mean that. You mean it's a mixed choir. In other words, you say next, it's composed of the Gabrielli's Own Choir united with the Polish National Youth Orchestra. Not the Polish National Youth Orchestra. It's the Polish National Youth Choir. It's the Polish choir. I mean, I have the recording. I could go look, but it's not the Polish National Youth Orchestra. So that's an error, which needs to be corrected. But beyond that, I think you're saying the choir is composed of two disparate elements, but a mixed bag means it's either, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's terrible. So it's unclear exactly what you're driving at here. The low point is the Demon's Chorus, where it cannot summon the snap and snarl needed to be truly menacing. Perfectly fine. Low-born clods are not low-born or cloddish enough. In this, it compares unfavorably with the way Barbarolli. In the other number, it compares unfavorably with the Barbarolli. No, just forget that. You made your point. In the other numbers, however, it has the heft necessary to convey a sense of angelic majesty. It has the necessary heft, period. You don't need angelic majesty. At times, it seems to outsing Foster Williams' soulful baritone. Again, soulful. Just outsings Foster Williams. A slight rebalancing of volume would have cleaned things up. All in all, McCreesh and his crew have done a sterling job, praiseworthy not simply because it tries to recapture how the music would have sounded in Elgar's time, but in its own right. Okay, So that's a very good final line. The problem I have is that the entire impression that the review gives, like I said, is that it's not sterling at all. It's very good, but not as good as this. This is very good, but this one is better. This is really nice, but that one doesn't do. You're undermining yourself at every point. The final question here is, do you want to recommend this or not? And if you do, you recommend it for its better qualities. Obviously, you can bring in comparisons. Obviously, not all the comparisons will be to this version's advantage, but you have to be vastly more strategic and not mechanical. Here's an example, here's its opposite. Here's an example, here's its opposite. Here's et cetera, et cetera. So at the end of the day, you wind up with this, oh, it's wonderful. It's like I said, it's a gramophone review. You wind up with, oh, this is just terrific. But the impression has been that you've canceled out everything you've said positively. And that's not where you want to be. So this is a very good and useful example, I think, in a work that tends to encourage a certain verbal excess. And you see that here. So I hope you take this constructively and you understand where I'm coming from and that you found this helpful. The big takeaway from this, as always, is concision. Don't overwrite. Don't modify every noun with an adjective. Don't describe things that need no description. Stick with the essentials and do them as well as you can. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me, and take care.